Good evening. This is RMF Publishing, and you're watching Testify, the series. Today we're with a brother and a friend, Mr. Reddick, member of United States Armed Forces. Go Army. A proud member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and a member of Prince Hall Masonry. We want to get started today with the second segment of Testify. And let's start from the beginning. What called you to serve in the U.S. Armed Forces, and what made that decision? What did that decision mean for you as a young black man at the time?
That's a very interesting question. I was in college at the time, 18, 19 years old, and at that same time, I had two sisters. One was in medical school, the other one was in law school. So, even though we came from an upper middle class family, money was tight. It was funny. And I wasn't at the college of my choice. I was at the college of my father's choosing. And there were a lot of nights where I was hungry. I didn't care for the cuisine. I didn't like the setting, which was country, and I'm from the city at that time of my life, and I wanted to do something different. So when an opportunity presented itself for me to transfer to another school, my father informed me that if you transfer, I will no longer financially support you. And I guess I was feeling myself. I said, well, Pop, you're not financially supporting me now, so I'm going to do what I need to do. Thinking back on it, I knew I still needed some help. So a friend of mine told me, hey, go check out the National Guard or the Army Reserves, see what they have to offer. So went to the recruiter, we talked. Next thing you know, I picked out what I thought would be a simple job, something easy to do, but there were no National Guard or Reserve slots available, which was garbage. Sure there were. He had to meet his quota. Young, dumb kid, he met his quota. He got me to enlist for an initial 3-year bid. So my motivation was to be able to take care of my own college needs and step into my own creation as a man, and remove my parents from the equation of having to take care of me.
Okay. Well, I in as far as being in the armed services, what were some of your proudest moments of your service, and some of the hardest?
Of course, back then, basic training was so much different than it is today. Okay. When I went in, drill instructors could still pop you upside your head gently or give you a loving thumb to the solar plexus to give you some act right. So, those are good times, and those are times that I never forget. I guess proudest moment was I got to go to the Pentagon a couple of times.
Okay.
And the Pentagon is overwhelming. I was there for a promotion ceremony, and I just felt privileged to be allowed to do that, to stand and rub elbows with high-ranking officers and officials. I saw full bird colonels running around fetching coffee. And as an enlisted man, you see that, you're like, wow.
Right.
He's nothing but a private officer at this point. But, I digress. My proudest moment while in the military was serving in the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment out of Fort Bliss. 3rd Cav had a storied history. Civil War, Spanish-American War, the war with Mexico against Pancho Villa, Blackjack Pershing, all the way through World War II, Korea, Vietnam, you name it. But to be a member of that prestigious color guard it was mind-blowing because we got to do a lot of traveling. We got special considerations. If we were on field training exercises and we were informed that we were needed for a ceremony, we get the helicopter ride back.
Oh, wow.
You know, that kind of stuff. But just, you know, to be recognized, you know, when you walk across the regiment, oh, those are the color guard guys. You know, they're some of the best at drill and ceremony, you know, or, you know, they get to ride horses every once in a while.
Okay.
So, a lot of people ask me about my nickname, Sugarfoot.
Okay.
You like the Ohio players? Well, yeah, I like the Ohio players. Love them. But it had nothing to do with them. The horse that I got to ride while in the military, who was about 5 or 6 years older than me at the time, his name was Sugarfoot. And you never tell Sugarfoot what to do. Sugarfoot did what he wanted to do.
Right.
You just rolled with it. Like, you going to the left? Okay, that's which way we're going. But that was a proud moment. And my deployment to the Middle East, even though it was terrifying, because, you know, we didn't know what we were walking into as young kids. And we had heard the stories of how this is a seasoned, battle-trained and tested Iraqi force that had been at war with Iran for 10 years. So these were battle-hardened troops. Nothing made me more proud than coming home to my mama. You know,
that's right.
That was a proud moment as well. Just to say, hey, I've done it, I'm done, and I'm going home.
Okay.
You know, and I'm not going home in pieces.
Right.
Even though I did leave some of myself over there, I feel. Mentally and physically.
Yeah. I guess that leads right into our next question. How has living with a full disability changed your perspective on strength, vulnerability, and purpose?
You know, I have a hard time with traffic jams. You know, especially here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because we have a lot of 4-lane highways. And when I see this traffic jam, it takes me back to Kuwait City and to the Highway of Death. I can see it. And my sense of smell is still heightened, and I can still smell the death that was on that road. And, you know, it's coincidence. 2 mornings ago, I'm stuck on Highway 67 going into Highway 35 because there's a fatality accident, and I was on this highway for almost 2 hours trying to get off of it, and I felt the it was closing in on me.
Yeah.
You know, when I initially started my sessions of counseling, I said, oh, this is BS. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm fine. You know, I'm just going to fake it and get through this just to get it over with. And then you start realizing that as you're talking, you're having Band-Aids ripped off of you. And pain that you had hidden or filed so deep within your subconscious is being rehashed and relived. And you realize that, hey, I do have issues. I do have problems. But, you know, for each of us that came back, we all deal with that war differently. We all deal with our experiences differently. No, it's not a badge of honor just to say I'm a 100% disabled veteran. It ain't a badge of honor, but it was my honor to serve, so I'm glad my country at least feels the obligation to take care of me, to see me through, you know, however many years I have left on this earth. I hope I've answered some of that question.
Yeah. You know, and from there, what do you wish more people understood about the experience of black veterans coming back home?
You know, it's strange because with the political environment that we've been experiencing since 2016, or, you know, I'll even take it further back, you know, when we elected Barack Obama. Racism isn't new. Bigotry isn't new, but it was sure in the closet, and it was well hidden. And as soon as he hit the forefront, it reared its ugly head big time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, with this current president and his rhetoric, doesn't help things. And can we pause for a sec?
Yep. Pause.
You know, as far as to today's black veterans, it's just a slightly different environment that we're faced with, but you know, there's still the racial bigotry and bias against the black soldier or soldiers of color in general. Even though we make up the vast majority of the combat armed services. When I say that, I mean the Marine Corps, you know, the Army. You know, we're the ones that are mostly the infantrymen, the cavalrymen, or the artillerymen. You know, we're the ones that do those jobs. You know, and our country is all gung ho, and you know, we support the troops, blah blah blah. I see too many young homeless people that are dealing with serious mental problems, you know, mental issues because of the things that they've seen. The saddest thing I've ever seen is walking through the airport and seeing a young soldier who's an infantryman. The infantrymen, they get what we call a CIB, which is the Combat Infantryman's Badge. As they earn it, during non-wartime, it's called an EIB, which is Expert Infantryman. And they're allocated to wear it on their uniforms, dress uniform and their battle dress uniform. This young man had 3 stars on his Combat Infantryman's Badge, which told me when you get a CIB, you get a reef around your rifle. That lets me know, hey, this guy was in combat. Every subsequent engagement, you get a star. So what that told me was that not only did he see action in Afghanistan, that means he was then deployed to either Iraq or some other area where there was conflict. It could have been Kosovo, you know, it could have been, he could have gone to Mogadishu. But that's too many times you rolling the dice, you know, as a young man. You know, that broke my heart to see that. Because politicians don't fight wars, but they damn sure start them. And they're not sending their children to fight these wars.
Right.
You know, former President Biden, yeah, his son was a combat veteran, but that's not the norm. You know, you're not going to see Baron Trump enlisting. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
But, you know, for our young black men, you know, I see the recruiters, I see the vehicles at the high schools. You know, I see them, you know, in the black neighborhoods. Where I'm not seeing them at, they're not at the Highland Parks and the, you know, the more affluent areas.
Right.
Doing recruitment. Because they don't have to. they're in the black area. But I think what I'm trying to convey is we're respected while we're in the uniform, but when we're out of that uniform, it can be a different story, especially for young men that don't have a solid base to start with. Yeah, the military tears you down and builds you back up, but if you didn't have that old man in the house that kept you straight as a kid, then you could get, lost in the sauce later in life as an adult. Stop me if it sounds like I'm just rambling.
Oh, no, you're telling the truth, bro.
I remember as I was in basic training, to me some of it was funny because I had been, I'd lived with my dad. So, he was as rough as any drill sergeant I could ever experience. And then I would look at the other kids, and it was breaking them. There were a lot of tears at night. What are you crying for? I miss my mom. Okay, I miss my girlfriend. That kind of stuff. I'm like, man, shut up so I can get some sleep, man. They're going to wake us up early. That kind of thing.
Okay. All right, we're back. Our second segment, we're talking about brotherhood beyond the battlefield. So you're a proud member of both the Masonic Order, Prince Hall, affiliated, and Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. What drew you to those brotherhoods after the military, or, were they always a part of your journey?
I'm not going to sit there and say they were always a part of my journey because I really didn't know that much about either, coming up. And I think when I left the military, there was a longing. I was always looking for something, that camaraderie, that connection, that shared commitment to ideology or to a certain set of principles or a way of conducting yourself, wanting to live your life. I knew that my great-grandfather was a 33rd degree Mason, only because, my mother would say things like, Papa would say he could go from coast to coast, travel the country without a dime in his pocket. Okay, I'm thinking, well, you can jump on any freight train if the boxcar is open to get in. You can travel that way. She's like, no. He said he could just stand at the crossroads and somebody would pick him up and say, oh, now you talking about that voodoo stuff, woman. She's like, no, boy, one day you may understand. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I had no direct interest in it at that time. And then as far as the Masonry goes, I met you, Brother McPherson, and the rest is his story. You showed me a different way of movement, a different way of being an integral part of a community, and how it can make a difference in your day-to-day movements and how you deal and interact with people. I think I had a temper at some time. I learned how to control my own inner aggressions, to restrain myself in instances where in the past, lock, cock, move forward. Right. I'm learning now that, I've learned that it's okay to say, you know what, my man, you have a good day. I'm not doing this with you, and get out of that area. get yourself out of that predicament. As far as Omega Psi Phi, I was approached by one of the brothers, and this is while I was still a freshman in college, and he and I had words in the past, not so pleasant words, but he said, I braced you and you stood your ground. I said, well, that's all I have is the ground underneath my feet. He said, that kind of stuff, those type of isms that you just let come off of you. The ground under my feet is all I have, and I'm going to stand on it. So you might whoop my ass, but every time you look in the mirror, you're going to know I was there. And that wasn't being threatening. It's just that, that I believed in defending myself to a fault. Now, I'm going to walk away today. Man, I got time to... Hey, man, I ain't finna fight with you or nobody else.
Right.
No, sir. I'm up, I'm out. But, it showed me something. And, then I started, learning the history and reading about who's who. And, for me, it was Langston Hughes, the poet of Harlem. Man, that was just it for me. And the diversity that is part of, the fraternity, learning members versus men, that shook me, to learn that and then to understand its true meaning. 8 men thoroughly immersed in the true spirit of Omega are far greater asset than 80 with a lukewarm enthusiasm. You do your duty that's best and leave unto the Lord the rest. Do your duty. Do what you're mandated to do. And everything else will work itself out, especially if you believe in your God. You're allowing him to guide your steps. I believe that. And then, to see the guy's name who wrote it, I think it's Walter Masick. Okay, that's a funny name for a brother. Masick. Masick was a white guy. I want to say he wrote that back in either 1941 or 1942. I do not remember. I have forgotten more than I can remember at this stage of my life, but he was a white member of Omega Psi Phi. And that to me was impressive, that the inclusiveness, not exclusiveness, but the inclusiveness, that spoke volumes to me. Yeah, everybody can tell you about Michael Jordan, Jesse Jackson, Ricky Smiley, and Tom Joyner, but, they're great men, but, I don't care how pretty the bricks are on your house. If your foundation is garbage, it's going to crumble.
No doubt.
It will crumble. So, the foundation of the fraternity is what's most important. Members versus men, in my opinion.
No doubt.
As far as Masonry, that turned out to be a no-brainer. That was an easy choice to make, and I'd make it again and again and again. In spite of what the world says about us. I can't speak on what they do in the Ku Klux Klan.
Right.
Because I'm not a member.
Right.
But I can only speak off of what I've seen. So for people to say that Masons are this and Masons are that, okay. We do great things for communities. We do great things for the world. Period. I've been to the Middle East, and had brothers. I've seen the brothers in the Middle East. I've seen, go to the gas stations. Hapu sees your ring, and he comes from around the counter to embrace and greet you. You know, so it knows no nationality barriers. You know, Masonry is borderless. There are no borders for it, and those that choose to walk that path are a special breed. I don't care what race you are, no matter how many letters you wear. Same principles apply. You know, what's your mandate? Take care of the widows and the orphans. Take care of humanity. Yep. You know, make the world a better place than what you found. Try to, at least. You know, that's what's on my heart.
Right. And that's it. That's all we're looking for. You know,
that's how I've seen it.
And I was going to ask you, you know, what's one lesson you carried from each? One from the military, one from Masonry, and one from the fraternity that still guides your life today. You know, and you kind of touched on it, but I'll let you, you know, expound on it one more time.
In the military, I had a battle buddy at one point who I knew was a, card-carrying member of the Ku Klux Klan. And, you know, initially there was some true friction between us. You know, he made some, and this is when, you know, racial sensitivity classes did not exist. So you pretty much say whatever the heck you wanted to each other. And he made the mistake of saying that, he said that I was a woodpile baby. I said, okay. I said, well, that's a new one on me. What is a woodpile baby? He said, well, you know, Master sent one of your ancestors to the wood pile to get a piece of wood for the fire, and he followed him out there, popped upside the back of the head, and got him a taste. I said, oh, that's what you're saying. That's what you mean. You're saying I have mixed ancestry. He's like, yeah. I said, oh, okay. That's how you feel about me as a colored man. Yeah. And that's when I explained to him about colors. And after I explained colors to him, we had a whole different understanding on how we were going to best support each other and protect each other's rear, or six, as we called it. Because I just simply told him, I said, you know what? When you get angry, you turn red. When you sick, you turn green. When you scared, you turn white as a sheep. Or you turn yellow like a coward. I said, the spectrum of the rainbow of colors that you distribute are far greater than mine. I said, and the funniest one is when you die, y'all turn black. He sat there for a few minutes, you know, because we're on the guard duty, and I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna have to fight in a minute. He just fell out laughing. He said, you know what, Reddick, you all right with me? I said, you know, Marius, you okay with me? I said, but just don't get it twisted. I said, you keep your craziness to yourself. You keep that foolishness to yourself. And you can learn a thing or two about humanity. I said, you know, my ancestors of African descent, they were figuring out geometry, building pyramids, raising statues. I said, your ancestors were trying to figure out how to make fire in a cave. I said, please don't take that in the wrong way. I said, it just is what it is. He said, fair enough. And we were cool after that. But I guess what I'm saying is, in the military, I had Asian brothers. I had, you know, black brothers. I had white brothers. You got the benefit of one of my most favorite, cherished, and loved brothers in the world when you were in New Mexico. And I think your truck broke down.
Right.
that little shorty on my foot came and got you. Showed you the hospitality that I would show you for one reason, and one reason alone. I just told him, hey man, that's my brother. Treat him accordingly. Yeah, okay, Rod, I got you. That was it. That was all that was said. And your own words were, hey man, that brother took care of me.
Yeah.
You know, I had him he was a 19-year-old private, scared to death. And I just told him, I said, hey man, we're going to get through this. You're going to go home. You're going to go back to your loved ones. Your mama's still alive? It's like, no, my mom is gone. I said, is your dad still alive? It's like, yeah. I said, you're going to get home to your dad. Don't worry about it. I said, you stay on my hip. I'm going to get you through this. And I did. You know, I pulled him along with me. And I love that young man. I mean, he ain't a young man no more, but I love him like the little brother I never asked for, never wanted. You know, the guy, he means the world to me. He's good as gold to me. He's one of the few people that if he calls me and says, hey, I need you, I'm going to cuss and fuss all the way. I'm going to cuss and fuss when I get there. I'm going to raise all kind of hell as we doing what we need to do.
Right.
Until we see it through to completion. But he's one of the few that can call me and say, I need you to walk through hell with me. I'd rather not, but brother, I'll be there.
No doubt.
You being another one. Like I said, my friends are on one hand.
And that leads into the next one. When life hit hardest, disability, transition, identity, how did your brothers show up for you?
Well, here's the funny thing about that. I guess I'm so private. And I held my pain so close to my chest. Nobody, you know, I held my cards so close to my chest. Nobody knew that I was hurting or in distress or in need of help or counseling. No, even I didn't realize it, that I had a certain level of volatility to me. But the one, you know, brother I was just speaking of, you know, he was there from the jump. You know, hey man, you need to take care of this. You need to get your paperwork in motion to, you know, to get some help. It wasn't even about getting the benefits. It was about talking to somebody.
Right.
You know, and working things out. You know, it was something that, you know, when I got home from the military and I moved to Mississippi, I started hunting avidly. I wanted to hunt. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. I had gotten accustomed to something, and I needed to have that release and that feeling of power. I needed that, and not to mention, I love deer backstrap, love deer tenderloin. So,
Yeah,
you know, I ain't gonna lie about that. But there were very few people that I relied on or leaned on or asked for anything. So I've always been the crutch or the one that, you know, somebody would call when they were in need. And I would definitely put my issues, problems on the back burner, because your well-being is just as important to me as my own. And if you are in need or in distress, well, let's take care of you. And I think in the process of taking care of you, I in turn receive some relief. You know, because I think there's always going to be some similarity, something that clicks. Say, oh, okay, I know what he's going through. You know, because I've been there. I'm dealing with that. I've dealt with that. So it's commonality, common ground. So I'm not going to say that brothers didn't help me along the way. I refuse to say that.
Right.
because there have been blessings bestowed upon me that at the moment that blessing was being issued, you don't recognize it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't see it. You don't know it. You don't know what the blessing is that walked in your life.
Right.
Or you don't know what blessing you've been to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know. Let me segue. I've got a friend here who lost his son to gun violence. And I said some words to him. Not that they were just words, but I was just, offering a father that was hurting a moment of comfort and understanding. And I just let him, I just told him, hey man, he's gone in the physical. I said, but he's gonna live forever. He's gonna live forever in you. The last thing you're gonna remember is not the fact that he was killed. You're gonna remember his smile. You're gonna remember that sparkle in his eyes. You're gonna remember his stupid laugh. One day that's what's gonna resonate with you. And then a couple of years ago, I get a package in the mail, and it's a plaque. And it had my words on there verbatim. What I said to him.
Yeah.
I didn't know that made that kind of connection for him. Awesome.
Okay, this next segment, we're going to talk about faith, resilience, and Black excellence. How has your faith or your spiritual practice evolved over time with everything you've experienced?
I think my faith wasn't tested. It was validated. Going to the Middle East, joining the military, and seeing life and death situations and participating in, life and death situations. Going to meet an adversary that I didn't know, who had done me no personal harm or ill, but at the same time making a commitment to, I will unalive him if I have to. And a lot of people will say, well, how do you come to terms, how do you come to grips with that? Well, there are going to be wars and there are going to be rumors of wars. I believe that's biblical. And I don't think, that first Gulf War didn't have anything to do with God. It was all greed. It was all, money, oil, territory, ego, whatever. But just being in that, in that arena, that theater, it's a head zapper. Within that first few days of being in country, to hear air raid sirens going off because this idiot is shooting Scud missiles, that could have been loaded with chemicals, and to see the look of fear on your brothers' faces, 18, 19-year-old kids who are facing potential death. And it wasn't funny, but, they told us on the plane ride, you got a brand new protective mask. It's brand new. I forget what the nomenclature was, an M17 or something like that. I don't remember. But they told us, you need to put it together. Have it ready when you disembark that plane. I'm like, okay. So mine was together. Mine was ready to go. Some people didn't listen. So here are these sirens going off, and there's tears, I'm going to say there was tears, there was wailing, there was gnashing of teeth. You know, people are panicking because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. I did. And once I put my protective mask on and took 2 steps back and put a fresh magazine in my M16 and locked and cocked it, don't come for my mask. But at the same time, it gave me pause because I'm looking at these civilians that were working. They were building compounds. They were from Turkey, Nigeria, Egypt. They were all of Muslim, Thailand. They were all of Muslim faith, but they weren't native to Saudi Arabia because natives in Saudi Arabia, they don't work. They don't have to work. But I'm looking at these guys, and they're looking at us like, what's going on? Why are you putting that on? Well, because there's possibility there's chemicals out there. So that in itself, you know, it made me reflect, and I'm thinking, my God, this is real. And Lord, I need you now like I've never needed you before. You know, this isn't me trying to avoid my father's belt. You know, this is me trying to avoid a chemical gas attack or whatever. And that whole situation shook me to my root, to my foundation. And, you know, we actually started doing, you know, we get together and read the Bible together. Personally, I wanted a better understanding of Islam. I wanted to know what made this man's religion any different from mine. And so, I'd pick up the Quran and try to read it and try to get an understanding of it. That wasn't easy because, I'm still young. I didn't have complete grasp of the Holy Bible. So here I am trying to grasp the Quran, and to me, it was baffling. It was mind-boggling. And all of it didn't make sense. Yeah, it was in plain English, but it just didn't make perfect sense. But it did push me back to my own religious beliefs. And it felt like I was in prayer for 7 months straight. At every turn. If that answers, I hope that.
Oh yeah.
I hope that gives you some.
It's strengthened. It actually strengthened your connection. It strengthened your faith. Yeah. Adversity has a way of doing that. Extreme adversity.
And that was considered extreme adversity.
Yes, sir.
To step off that airplane and to step into 115-degree heat with 100% humidity. Oh, sweet. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Sweet Jesus. This is hot. And this ain't even close to hell.
Right.
So I definitely don't want to go there. I don't want to go to hell because this is hot.
It's hot. Yeah.
I don't want to experience that. But it gave me a connection, and it made me want to try to be a different person. But, at the same time, I was going down a dark path at the very same time, unknowingly, because of what I was experiencing and what I was going through, what I was dealing with. To look out on the horizon. Here we are, sitting, what time is it? It's 9:30 or 8, whatever. And this is what it looked like at 11 o'clock in the morning over there once those oil fires kicked off. It's pitch black. And I'm breathing this crap.
Yeah.
And, that's part of my disability today is respiratory because of the crap that I breathe. Yes, I smoke, but it wasn't meant for me to breathe oil burning, to be covered in it. It just wasn't.
What's something you feel you've overcome that most people wouldn't know just by looking at you?
Mm. A cocaine addiction.
Mm. Yeah.
Truth and honest.
Yeah.
A cocaine addiction.
Yeah. Care to expound on it a little bit?
Brother, that white devil is something else.
Yeah.
It is something else. You know, in the military, we experimented. You know, it was a little bit different environment than it is now, and it was easy to get it.
Yeah.
And you don't think that it's having an adverse effect on you, and then one day it hits that black booger.
Mm.
You know, that long black booger. Like, what the hell is this?
Right.
And then it got back to my mother.
Mm.
And she lost it. You know, she lit me up. She went up one side and down the other. Because I think she had a brother that was a drug addict, and she worked with a bunch of Vietnam veterans when she was at the Department of Unemployment Insurance. And, you know, these guys were full-blown heroin addicts. They're in the parking lot during their lunch break shooting up. They're not eating, they're shooting up. So my mother saw it, and, you know, she told me I needed to take care of it, get that fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Do it however you need to do it, but you can't, it's not sustainable. It will kill you.
Right.
And yeah, it would.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I was able to just overcome it, you know, and never look back.
It's good business. I'm glad you did.
Yeah, never look back.
Mm-hmm. It was meant for you to overcome that. Coming back to brotherhood and so forth, what does manhood mean to you now compared to what you thought it meant when you were 18?
I mean, at 18, we thought manhood, and you probably would feel the same, was chest bumping.
Mm-hmm.
It was about conquest, body counts, if I can say it in that form.
Right.
And dropping seeds everywhere.
Mm.
And I found that those things are the traits of a coward.
Say that.
That's all cowardly behavior that I participated in. Today, you know, I think manhood is stepping in front of an adverse situation. It's offering protection to someone or protecting something that is vulnerable without thinking of oneself. Manhood is selfless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, when my son was born, picked him up out of his crib, and I told him, as long as I'm here, nothing's going to ever happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
I said, if something happens to you, just be rest assured that they got through me. But I did my best. It's when you reach a point of consciousness where you will say, without thought, I'll die for these people.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'll move heaven and earth to see them safe. I'll hustle like nobody else to make sure that they eat, that they're fed, that they've got a roof, and comforts. Providing for your family, to me, that's the mark of true manhood. And having a faithful breast, an instructive tongue, and a receptive ear. Those are my virtues of manhood. I gotta listen to you.
Yeah.
I have to give you what I think is my wisdom from my instruction. And I have to adhere to those values, which is my faithfulness. And it may be to a fault. How many times do you forgive your brother? I forget what the Bible says. What is it? 7 times?
7 times 7.
Yeah. You forgive, and you keep providing instruction. I've got brothers that I knew they were in a bad spot, whether it be alcohol or drugs, and you cringe when the phone rings and it's them. I mean, literally, like, what does he want? But to remain vigilant and talk to them, not lecture,
right?
But just to talk, to give them. I had one cousin. I knew he was out there bad, and I'm one of his few advocates because I knew what he was dealing with. I knew why he was a drug addict. He was in so much pain from scoliosis. And the barbaric practices in the 80s to fix it. At some point, pain pills don't do it.
Right.
He became a drug addict to the point where, his own father didn't want him at the house. His is a story of sadness and pain, but he was able to turn a corner and get clean and stop drinking and stop using drugs. And my last trip to Chicago, we hung out extensively, and he thanked me. I said, "What are you thanking me for?" He's like, "You never gave up on me." He said, "I know you didn't want to talk to me at times." I said, "No, it's not that." He's like, "No, brother." He said, "I know it was." He said, "But you would still give me words of encouragement. You would still talk to me. You would try to help me."
Yeah.
I said, "Well, that's a duty. That's a mission. That's a mandate. Yeah. Brother, I can't leave you out there like that. I'm not supposed to. I can't step over you and then climb into bed and sleep like a baby at night, knowing that you're hurting, you're down on your luck." Yeah, some of it was a self-inflicted wound, but it's still a wound. So you've done it.
Yeah.
It's part of our makeup, our DNA. You saw your dad do it.
Yeah.
I definitely saw my dad do it. So we emulate, good or bad.
Right. That part.
We're going to emulate it, good or bad. So hopefully I answered that question without deviating too far.
Right. No, the truth is the truth, man. If you were mentoring a young black man today, maybe someone considering the military or college, what's the real advice you give him that's not in a textbook or a recruiter's brochure.
There ain't a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That's the first thing I'm going to tell them. And they'll probably say, well, what does that mean? That all that glitters ain't gold. You know, the recruiter's going to tell you what he needs to tell you to meet his quota. With today's political environment, man, I say skip the military altogether. And if you don't have the inclination for college, there's nothing wrong with trade school.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with doing HVAC, electricians, plumbers, you know, masonry. There's absolutely nothing wrong with those fields of endeavor. And some of them can be lucrative. You know, if you don't feel that college is for you, but you got to eat, you need a trade.
Yep.
If you're just hell-bent on going to the military, well, of course I'm going to tell you to avoid combat arms at all costs. You know, the last thing you want to be is an infantryman, you know, or in a tank. You know, you want to be as far from combat as possible, you know, in the rear with the gear or, you know.
Right.
So, man, you join the Air Force, you know, join the Coast Guard, whatever. But just, you know, if you can go to school and get a trade, if you can go to college, if that's your path, you know, go to get an education. Can never take that away from you.
Right.
Never. That's yours. That's the one thing that society can't remove from you is your education. And it seems that today, you know, I keep alluding to this political environment. You know, people are like, well, why are they gutting the Department of Education? Well, because they need an ignorant demographic to rule over. You know, and it was as simple as I could put it. You know, what happened to Schoolhouse Rock? You know, and I was saying that to Dorothy, and she was like, Schoolhouse Rock? I was like, yeah. She's like, oh, you talking about the preamble? I was like, yeah. I said, we all stood up and sang that song when it came time for us to recite the preamble.
Right.
I said, but we nailed it. We all knew what a
bill.
We all knew what a bill was. You know, we knew what a conjunction was.
Come on.
We knew what a conjunction did. You know, because of this. And here you have this administration. You know, he puts the CEO's wife from the WWE in charge of the Department of Education. This woman's never stood in the classroom. Doesn't even have a doctorate in education. That's insulting. You know. It's just an insult. And to look at other posts that he's filled with people that are beholden to him is sad. You know, it is. It's just, and it's sickening. Will we get through it? Yeah, I think we will. Will we have a civil war? I don't think so. I hope not. But each month that passes, I got to go get another box of ammunition. You know, that's just par for the course.
Yeah.
But to that, you know, to that young brother, get that education. By any means necessary, get it. And I know it's not easy, but nobody can take it away from you.
That's right.
And it opens so many more doors. It's a key to successes. You know, when we go to retail stores, and you know, you hand somebody a $5 bill and an extra quarter so you can get a solid dollar back, and they look at you, well, why you give me this extra quarter for?
Right.
Or why for come you give me this extra quarter?
Right.
You know what? Just give me that back. and we good.
Right.
So I owe you $1 change? Yep, you do. Give me, yeah, come on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the sad part, is the dumbing down of a people.
Yeah.
You know, it's systematic. And we as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, we now have even more of a responsibility to educate this generation.
Yeah.
You know, we have to educate them. This man's trying to erase us from the history books. Mm-hmm. You know, you take Medgar Evers' name off of a Navy frigate, and you say it's because of DEI or whatever. Like, wait a minute. This guy's a World War II veteran. Mm-hmm. He served his country honorably. He was a civil rights icon. Lost his life. And you say that this is about diversity, and you want to erase him from the history books. You know, so I say it sarcastically. I said, fine. Then you get rid of Dory Miller. You get rid of Colonel Charles Young's name from the history books. You rescind any Congressional Medal of Honor that was issued or awarded to any African American or any one of Asian American descent or Hispanic descent. Erase them from the history books. Go to the Vietnam Memorial, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Mm-hmm. Take a chisel, and if they're not, you know, if they're Black, Hispanic, or Asian, chisel their name off the wall. If that's how you want to erase us, do it. Go right ahead. But you can't erase the footprints of history. You can take our names down all you want to. Mm-hmm. That's fine. You can't erase the footprints that are in California that came across the Rio Grande. You can't erase the footprints of those that came from Asia. You can't erase the footprints on the water from Africa. You can't erase those footprints. You just can't do it. Because we are trying to pass down that knowledge to the next generation. I have a son that is trying to absorb all he can. When our fathers died, the library burned. Yep. The village lost the library. Thankfully, we read at least 75% of the books.
Right.
And, you know, and we can keep it going.
Yeah.
That's our mission. That's our response. That's not a mission. That's a responsibility. We must. We have no choice. We have to.
Yeah.
You know, we owe that. That's a debt, and we have to pay it.
And that leads into my final question, and then we'll wrap up. And it's you know, when it's all said and done, how do you want your name to be remembered in your family, in your lodge, in your community?
That's deep, you know, because to my family and friends, you know, I guess, you know, I related to my mom and dad. You know, my dad said it. He's like, you never show up when I want you to. And I kind of sat back on that one. I'm like, wow, man. He's like, no. He's like, you never show up when I want you to. He said, but damn it, when I need you, you the first one through the door. I said, well, that's how you raised me. I said, it ain't always about good times and fun. I want to be remembered as that friend that showed up, not when it was always good times.
Right.
I'm that friend that you called in the midnight hour. And you really stood in need. Because if I have it, if I can help you, my true friends know that they can call me. Is Rodney gonna cuss?
Oh yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Oh shit, yeah. Hell, you gonna be all kinds of SMFs and DMFs and some SOBs as we taking care of business.
Right. Well, I will say in wrapping up, if you had 30 seconds to speak to every young black man in America right now, what would you say?
30 seconds. Go become a member of the NRA first. Secondly, get your concealed carry. Third, make sure you have good legal aid and advice and a lawyer on retainer. When you get paid, always pay yourself first. Make sure you save money for a rainy day, and I don't mean in the bank. Get you a safe in your house to make sure you have a store of cash. Keep water. Get a generator for your house. You know, and make sure that you have plenty of ammunition for your weapons, and buy as many weapons as you can.
Say that.
Buy them. If it's legal in your state, buy it. Go to the gun range. Let your face be seen at the gun range. Roll up in there, because they look at you. All right? We ain't the deacons for defense. But damn it, you gonna have to stand up at some point.
Yeah.
You know, don't be anybody's victim. And don't be the last one to know. None of us want to face death, but it's inevitable.
Yeah.
You're gonna go out. It just depends on how you do it. You gonna stand up on 10? Or you gonna lay down?
Well,
that would be my 30 seconds. Oh, take care of your mama.
No doubt.
Take care of your mama and love your wife.
That's it.
And give your sons an example.
That's it. That's you just slammed the gavel onto the dais. And with that being said, I appreciate you taking out the time to talk with RMF Publishing in this episode of Testify, the series. Thanks again. I appreciate you, bro.